Good afternoon, Sean.
What's happening? What's happening? What's happening?
So on today's episode of the Better Days Reign Q&A,
Q&A.
Sean, what do you know about being selfish and recognizing selfishness in addiction?
Bro, you don't really realize how selfish you are in addiction. And it's not to just the addiction yourself, but to everything around you, right? It's all about how things affect me, right? My trauma, my the way I perceive things, you know what I'm saying? So like it drifts off way more than just the selfishness of gotta have my drugs. It's the selfish nature around it, right? And I think we kind of picked that up like pre-addiction. You know what I'm saying? Because I what I've noticed is even a lot of non-player characters display absolute selfishness.
Absolutely.
You know what I mean? And so when I look at a lot of people who you would think are genuine good people, and I'm looking at them like, yep, I remember them days. You know what I'm saying? Like I remember them days when I was fully selfish.
Well, do you think that in addiction or not, that selfishness is intentional, or is it more of a survival mechanism for some people?
I think people are oblivious to it. Honestly, right? Like again, because we have this very negative outlook on life, and this, it's where we put our focus, right? So it's always towards me. It's always towards how I'm feeling. Like when I talk to families of addicts, you know what I mean. A lot of times, it's they take their loved one's addiction as a personal attack, right? And it's not a personal attack, right? That person just doesn't know how to display good behavior, right? Um, you Everybody wants to take things personal, and a lot of times it's not a personal vendetta. My actions towards people, right, wasn't personal towards them. It was personal towards me, of course, right? Because I'm thinking about my addiction. I'm thinking about what I want to do on a Friday night.
Oh,
I'm,
so you're putting your own needs and desires above those of other people.
right, and we
Yeah,
tend
which
to
is
do that.
the definition of selfishness.
Yeah, we tend to do that in everyday life, right? How it affects me. So what's hard is taking yourself outside the box, taking yourself out of the box and looking at it through different perspectives. And that's what you kind of get to learn to do in recovery is you take yourself out of that box and you take suggestions from people, you do some very intimate self-reflection and try to learn to understand your behavior,
So
right?
break it down for me. Give me a couple more examples of how you put your own needs above or desires above others and even the ones that you care about. Because you have your
Couple
circle and then you've got your family and people you care about, respect. How did you put your needs above those people?
Well, I mean, okay, so for one was the drugs, right? I was a heroin addict, so for me, um, somebody asked me like, "Hey, man, first thing in the morning, hey, I need you to do this," right? My habit came first. For heroin addicts, it's first early in the morning is the worst time of day because you wake up sick, right? You've had time for your body to kind of detox some of that stuff. You're gripping real hard, so that's first things first. And if I have my drugs, then I can manage that real quickly. If I don't have my drugs, well, that process has to start first, right? So sometimes you go, you got to go do what you got to do to be able to get your drugs, and that takes hours and hours and hours, right? Everybody's on tweaker time, and then you can start your day, right? So, but there's also a cutoff point, right? Because I know tomorrow morning's coming. So if I did used all my drugs, then I got to make sure I get more, so that way tomorrow morning, I'm not waking up sick. So, and it just kind of repeats this selfish cycle of I got to use my drugs or I got to get my drugs, and everything else gets put on hold.
So, was there ever a moment where you realized that that cycle or behaviors that led to that cycle impacted other people negatively? And
Every day,
so how did you realize though that that was the cycle you were in?
Bro, honestly, I was in a place of some severe like self-hate, right? And I look at acceptance as kind of like a double-edged sword, right? I can accept either being bad or I can accept being good, right? And being in addiction for as long as I was, I accepted where I was, right? I looked at myself as a heroin addict. I looked at myself as a the dredge of society, and I justified it, right, by saying I'm gonna be this bad guy over here, and so everybody else can. I'm a sacrifice my good nature
Yeah, okay, I
so
get
that
it.
everybody else can be grateful
I
for the way
gotcha.
that they live. You know what I mean? And
Well,
and, and I embraced that.
so how did recovery shift that mindset for you? Because you're not self-centered anymore.
No, man, and I think that's really where service played a big part, right? I'd never done service work in my life. Now, don't get me wrong, I've done quite a bit of community service, but you know what
Yeah.
I'm saying? Like, I've never actually voluntarily went and did service work to see what the benefits of it were, and I think a lot of people don't. Um, and this is something I wish that I could, you know, get into like parole boards and probation officers' heads. There's a difference between me walking around picking up trash on the side of the highway, right? Which makes me feel like even more like a piece of trash. It puts me out there for the world to see, puts a very negative self image of myself out there in the world, right? Versus going and doing something that's of benefit to somebody, right? In person, right? So, because you get to see the benefits of helping people, of doing positive things for people. And what that does is that inspires growth.
So they do things like that to make you be humble, but humility doesn't. You don't become humble and have humility through public retribution or
Yeah,
public
yeah, I think it.
spectacle.
I get what they say. Like it's supposed to be a punishment, right? But I carried that negative self image for a lot of years, and when you learn to just accept it on those terms, right, it becomes who you are.
Well, so when I think in the past we've talked about how the names and the way that people speak about themselves, whether they're in active recovery or addiction, like we talked about, like going to AA meeting and saying, "Hey,
Yeah,
I'm Mike and I'm an alcoholic." Those negative connotations that we add to that creates a problem for us and people that are trying to go through recovery. But at what point do you think you can let that go and get rid of that self-centered thinking when you're in recovery? Is there like a timeline in recovery where you finally realize it click that what people call you or say about you doesn't matter anymore?
bro. I think that's comes with what you choose to do in your recovery, right? I've seen a lot of people go to meetings and they've been doing this thing for 20 years, right? And they come sit down in a recovery room and they're absolutely just miserable.
Well,
They're
is it
sober, but they are miserable
is
being
it
sober.
but is that miserableness coming from them not being self-aware?
I think it's honestly, it's like that's where life ended,
Okay.
right? So there's a difference between sobriety and recovery,
Yes,
right?
absolutely.
Sobriety means I'm just not using, right? Recovery is I'm sober. What am I going to do with it? Where do I go from here? And it's what we choose to do once we get sober that was where you embrace actual real recovery, right? So, I've met a lot of people where simply getting sober was the highlight of their life.
So you and I both know people that are active in active addiction,
Yeah.
whether it be drugs, alcohol.
Mhm.
How do we help them become self-aware and recognize that they're being selfish, or can we even do that? Do they have to do that on their own?
Takes a like I said, it takes an intimate self reflection, right? And to get people to recognize the role they play in their destruction. I can think back to many times where I did something wrong and I got busted and I blamed the world. Or, you know what I'm saying? Like, it was really funny. So I got a friend named Alvin. I'm gonna tell the story real quick, right? So we're sitting in a meeting the other night, and he says he was talking about when he was a kid, he used to get into a lot of fights in school. He said this one time I got into this really bad fight, and my dad came down on me and took me to the house, and he started scolding me. Why are you acting like this? And he said, it's your fault. You named me Alvin. Who wants to be named Alvin? Because
That's
well,
funny.
because they were bagging on him. They were
Yeah.
like, "Hey, Alvin, where's Theodore?" And
Yeah. Yeah. I
you know
knew
what I
there
mean,
was
the
an Alvin and the
chipmunks. You know what I'm
Chipmunks then.
saying? And bro, I just died laughing. I was like, he's got a point. You know what I mean? Like it was really funny, but that's how we look at things in addiction, right? It's everybody else's fault. The reason I got jammed up. It's everybody else's fault. The reason I was homeless. We take our life circumstances and we want to put it on somebody else
So,
because it's easier. It's
so,
easier for me to blame you
oh, yeah.
than it is for me to put the work in to recognize the role I played in my destruction, right? It's easier for me to say you're the devil, than it is for me to look at myself and go, you know what? I'm a whole asshole. You know what I mean? So, but once you own your role, you know what I'm saying? You recognize that role.
I've been telling you all day, I just wish people would own their actions.
And it's hard, bro. It's not.
Oh, I know it
It's
is.
it's it's habit forming,
Oh,
right?
it absolutely is. And I, as someone who's not in active addiction or going through recovery from drugs and alcohol, I'm an asshole.
Yeah.
I get it.
At times. At times. But you know what I'm saying? You're a productive asshole, so it's okay.
Yeah, yeah.
You know what I'm
Okay,
saying?
thanks for
Yeah, yeah. But like it's like any other concept. For me, it was forgiveness, right? Forgiveness was huge for me. Uh, I didn't know how to forgive myself because I was blaming everybody else for my problems, and
well, and you found that sense of purpose through service work,
but it's
right?
but it's hard to recognize that role sometimes, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Sometimes I just simply put myself at the wrong place at the wrong time, right? Which does that make me necessarily wrong for maybe what I'm getting blamed for, And I had to look back at a lot of this. I've gotten in trouble for a lot of things that I didn't do. But there's a big thing. What role did I play in it, right? I put myself in that environment for one. I put myself around those toxic people that I know I shouldn't, and it's when people always kind of take that conversation offensively at first, because especially victims, right? I'm the one that took the beating. How did I do anything wrong? Right. But it's sitting down and saying, okay, you took the beating, but what position did you put yourself in? Were you around people you shouldn't have been around? Were you doing things you shouldn't have done? You know what I'm saying? And, surrounding yourself in a whole bunch of mess that you had no business being a part of. That's what's hard to get people to recognize.
Well, and so that brings to mind the phrase "bigger than you." Right?
Yes. Yeah, man.
In recovery, it is about you, but it's also about doing things and being something bigger than what you currently are or were in the past.
So I had to look at this in a broader scale because, I started off in AA, right? And we talk about a higher power a lot, and for many of us, that's God. And then I started drifting off from AA and saying, well, how are some of these other people getting sober, right? And how are some of these other people who aren't faith based or different types of faith, right? Whether they're Buddhist or whether they believe in just karma or, what I'm saying, just moseying through life. How do they do it, right? And what I came to the conclusion is these people have adopted some sort of bigger than me concept,
Sure.
right? Which is my motivation. It's where I get my drive from, you know. So I think it's really important that people adopt a bigger than you concept, whatever that is, whatever that may be. You know what I'm saying? Something that takes you from a selfish mentality and you're working towards something. And when you're working towards something, that's selfless. That's selfless because you're doing service not just to the world around you, but to yourself.
Well, and
You're selflessly selfish at that point.
right, and that's where I think the misconception comes from for people who see, like, go to the gym. Right? Let's use a gym guy, for example.
Yeah.
They call people that go to the gym all the time selfish, but he's actually working on himself physically, which in turn automatically helps you mentally. And then
Right.
if you look at some of the very successful weightlifters and bodybuilders and people like that, guess what they do in their community? They're selfless. They give back to their communities. They teach classes. They work with people in recovery, right? I mean, I know a lot of IFBB
Yeah.
pros that former steroid guys working with bodybuilders coming up now that like we're not going to let you do this. We know the hazards of this road. We've been down it here.
Yeah.
Be better, right? So, and I've seen this in you. You do some of your best work on yourself when you're really helping other people.
I do. I do. So,
And so with that though, what is one or two things that have really helped you that you recognize, hey, when I do this, it really helps me more than it helps the other person? Give me a couple examples.
as a coach, you, especially working with people in recovery, people will latch on to you, right? They latch on to your growth, and they ask you for advice. They look for guidance. They, they look for you to, in a sense, be that higher power, almost,
Sure.
right? It's that person I can lean on. So it's the responsibility that I have today to stay sober that keeps me sober, right? Because if I fail, then they're likely to fail. And it's because it's just kind of how like the human brain's wired, right? We look for excuses to not do the hard thing,
Oh yeah. Well,
right?
nobody wants to go to the gym and
It's
lift.
inspirational when somebody does the hard thing and is making it. They're
Yeah.
like, oh yeah, but as soon as that person fails, I knew it wasn't real. I knew it couldn't be done, and we use that as an excuse to put a stop on progress.
See, and that's why my mindset is I love an underdog.
Yeah.
Never underestimate the little guy.
Well, you know what I love about an underdog story, bro, is and I've been kind of watching this on a lot of like YouTube and things like that, right? Is where the focus lies. Addicts especially were very consequence focused. In the groups we go to, constant talk about consequence, constant, and I get to the point where I get tired of hearing it personally, right? So what I had to do, man, is I had to step out and do a mindset shift. I had to quit looking at all the bad stuff. I had to quit looking at the consequences and start focusing on them, right? Quit looking at what happens if things go wrong, but
Sure.
what happens when it goes right?
Well, and I
What
think
happens if I win? And we're just not accustomed to winning.
the problem that I see here in that statement is not with your statement itself that there's a problem. I think the problem ultimately resides in that people don't understand they only fail when they give up.
Right. Right. And
So I do know in recovery, I see people do things for validation versus, you know, doing it for their higher purpose or their calling.
mhm,
We see this a lot with the charlatans type
right.
style recovery coaches or
Right.
people that have never actually been an addict but do these kind of programs. Um, what do you think the difference is between validation, doing something like giving to the community for validation versus doing it for an actual purpose?
I think it's people who do it with the actual purpose have a mission. And that is their mission to help people, right? People who do it for validation kind of fall into this but I guess you could say like they put themselves on a pedestal, right? They want to say everybody look at me, and they're doing it because it's an ego trip, right? It's an ego trip, and uh, higher, what is it, mightier than thou? You know what I mean?
Oh yeah,
It's just the look at me.
the holier than thou.
Yeah, let me glorify myself, right? Instead of remaining humble, right? And humility is a huge part of recovery. You know what I'm saying? And that's why I love doing the show. Not necessarily because I love being on the camera, but I mean I'm not gonna lie and say I don't. But you know what I mean? It's to help other people, right? That's the goal, is to help other people. And when that's your goal, you again are falling into that selflessness, right? It's that service where you feel like you're doing God's work.
What's funny is you just answered my next question.
Yeah.
What do you do to remind yourself daily that Your recovery is not just about you. But
Oh, it's
the thing is,
absolutely
you
not.
just answered it because you do this.
It's and you know, I'll say this like too, like money is always a huge factor with people, right? Um,
Yeah, it's two dudes sitting here with no money.
yeah, you know what I
We
mean,
get it.
and like, but it is, it's a huge factor. Like I've seen people abandon recovery altogether because they have anxiety fits over money, and they freak out, right? You usually see that in people in early recovery. They're like, I got to do something, I got to get out of here, and they're like, jump ship from treatment. You know, it's those moments of weakness where we let outside influences uh destroy us, right? We give into it, you know, whether it's outside pressure from family or friends, or typically you see a lot of it from dads who have baby mamas, and baby mamas like to go talk a whole bunch of mess on them, so they panic, and but it's those relationships, I guess you could say, relationships that are just toxic. Those toxic relationships that put a lot of stress on things, and you have to kind of just put money away for a little bit, right? And I notice when I'm focused on money, I get very non-productive, right? When I start stressing myself out about my income, all of a sudden I'm no longer of service.
Yeah, you do.
You know what I mean?
I'll call you out on it,
I
and I have
do.
called
I
you out on it.
stress, man. Like, you know what I'm saying? And it's a natural thing, right? But I have to always keep reminding myself, like that's not what I'm in it for.
Well, and
I'm in it to help people.
that leads me to my next question. Give me a few examples of what people can look forward to when they get away from that selfish mindset.
Freedom, man. It's freedom and peace. You know, to me today, my peace is worth more than any dollar sign. Right? I have a peace of mind about me that I'm not angry anymore. I'm I try not to be selfish. You know what I'm saying? I think we all have our selfish moments, but I'm much more of service to my community. Whereas used to I was chaos in my community. Uh, have a very more positive self image of myself. So it's you become a new person when you embrace being selfless. And I think that's the reward of it. That's really the reward of recovery is peace of mind, right? And it gives us purpose. There's tons of benefits too.
Well, let's take it to a spiritual aspect, right?
Yeah,
There's a couple places in the Bible where the the fruits of the spirit are mentioned, right?
yeah, yeah.
So you've got love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control.
Right.
Now, I know there's a lot of people that will watch this and go, "Oh, the Bible," but you just said like half of that list when you stop being selfish.
Bro.
You find those things you're truly been looking for.
And you do it kind of subconsciously. It kind of just happens, bro. And you can do it real quick. And I built the program, the Better Days Dream program, addiction recovery program, and I was looking at it the other day, and I'm like, there's only two things that my program can't provide, right? And that's accountability. I can't force someone to do it as much as I would love to. I can't.
Oh yeah, I got a few people we need to hit with your book.
You know what I'm saying? I can't force them to do it, and I can't force them to do service work. You know what I'm saying? Those are two things that have to be optional.
But I love some of your guests have come in here and said flat out like that's been the greatest joy of their recovery
Yeah,
is that service work, finding that
bro.
purpose.
It is so key to discovering your growth. You know
Well,
what I'm
and
saying?
then that leads you back into gratitude, which is something you
Absolutely.
talk about all the time. Gratitude plays a huge role in connecting to something bigger than yourself, connecting with other people, turning so it you become that addictive snowball that we talked about
Hmm.
earlier now becomes this snowball of patience and kindness and gentleness, which I've seen a huge shift in you over the last year.
Well, once you start adopting spiritual principles, right? Especially that unconditional love model, which requires forgiveness, grace, respect, and service, right? When you adopt that, that will make you grateful for your hardships, right? When you can take your trash and use it to help other people and be of benefit, I don't think I think that's the point, right? I look back in the Bible and I see some of these, disciples and saints who lived very raw, rough lives,
Oh, dude, like
like tough,
they ended up,
tough,
yeah, like some of their stories are insane,
awful, awful
and how they
stories,
died
man.
is even more like
Yeah,
horrific.
yeah, but there is something about going through extreme loss, right? Defeated, just absolutely being defeated and feeling undeserving of a good life that once it's kind of 180s and starts turning around, there's a deep connection there, right? And it's something I really can't explain. I try to sit there and and put it into words at times, but it really starts with forgiveness, man. You know what I'm saying? When you can learn to forgive yourself and learn others and forgive others, like I think that embodies the essence of what God wants us to really learn. And if you can't truly forgive people, then I don't think you can truly love people.
Oh, I would 100%
You
agree.
know what I'm saying? And but that's what God does, man. He forgives. And so when you learn that, that's like, oh,
So Sean, do
I
you ever,
just got the keys to the castle.
yeah,
You know what I mean? Like
so do you ever find yourself sitting there being grateful for that grace and forgiveness that he gives you,
every day,
and that he's led you to forgiving yourself,
every day, man. It opened the door to real recovery.
and realizing that we're not worthy of that kind of grace,
And
but we have to give it to be.
you really
That's
do,
that's
bro.
the key.
And I'll tell you something else about forgiveness. Forgiveness isn't always about other people.
No,
Yes, it's good to right your wrongs. It absolutely is good to right your wrongs. But forgiveness is for you,
absolutely,
right? And I didn't know, I never understood this, right? I didn't do it until I started practicing it, you know?
dude. I didn't learn
But
that until my 40s either. So you're not alone there, bro.
you know what I'm saying? Like, it didn't even happen the first time I practiced forgiveness. I had to practice it over and over and over again, right? But what I realized is every time I was doing that, I was getting a little less bitter. I was feeling a little less hate. I was feeling a little better about myself. And the key to forgiveness is, man, it's about liberating you from the burden of your past, right? And God wants good things for you, and He wants to open up doors for you, right? For you to, be a better person and have a good life, but He has to close doors first. Like He has to close the doors to all the trash that you've put out there, right? And forgiveness is key to that. It's to Forgiveness is key to closing those doors. And man, as those doors start closing, other doors start opening.
Man, I've found it so much easier to forgive other people than it is to forgive myself at times.
Yeah. Yeah. Today I can forgive just about anybody for anything. To be honest with you, I don't have a very drama filled life anymore. I'm really at peace, and I've practiced a lot of humility and being humble.
Well, if you don't take your wife
Kind of had
flowers
to.
later, you're gonna have some
Oh
drama.
yeah, she gets flowers a lot. Wifey gets flowers. She gets a lot of recognition.
Well, we are a Warrior Garden studio. We do provide
And she
floral
embodied
arrangements
that
for the
essence of
spouse.
forgiveness, man. Last year when she really went outside the box for me and did something when I was in a bad space, right? Where I was all of a sudden hating myself again and kind of falling apart and happy to do it. I was at a place where I was too chicken shit to pull the trigger myself, but I didn't care if anybody else did, you know? And sh- everyone and everyone told her, get away from me. I was never going to change. I was going to be the same old piece of shit that I've always been. And when she told everyone no and stepped up, that changed everything. That just changed it all right then and there. Like, and it was inspiring, And so when you get inspired like that, and it was the same way when I was in treatment, people were doing things for me that I felt like I didn't deserve. Right? I was on my deathbed, and people were sitting next to my bed, making sure I was okay. They didn't have to be. They didn't have to do that. It wasn't part of their job description to, do those things. They had a whole house to look out at, but they chose to sit next to my bed. and make sure that I was okay. And bro, that just it changes you.
Well, I asked you if there was a difference about doing things for validation, and I think maybe what I meant was, do you ever do anything for affirmation? Because that's exactly what she did. She affirmed who she is with you. She confirmed to you who she really is. That is somebody that loves wholeheartedly. She's all in.
All
Do you ever do anything for those affirmations? Because I don't see you do that. But do you feel like sometimes you do things or go through motions just for that affirmation or validation?
no, not for me.
And I don't see that
You know what I'm
for you.
saying? If I'm trying to affirm anything, it's God's presence in people's lives, right? Where I try to get people to recognize some of the things that it's really hard to understand, and like how God sits us down at times, or God makes us go through a tragedy so He can make something beautiful happen afterwards. I went through that really bad tragedy, but when you look at that tragedy and what's transpired since, that tragedy would have never happened. I'd have never found the growth I needed.
Well, and so that leads me to my last question for this episode. What advice do you give somebody who's still struggling, who hasn't maybe had that transformative moment, who hasn't hit that brick wall, not rock bottom, because we're not talking about the same thing. This is that self awareness, that awakening of self. What advice do you give somebody who's real close to that, or just now finding that self awareness?
Man, sit down, listen. Just, you know what I mean? Kind of kill the noise, right? Kill all the noise around you. Find you a good friend, somebody who legitimately cares about you or in your situation. Simply just shut up and listen. Shut up and listen and take the suggestion, right? And that's the hardest thing is because we want to we have these habits, right?
Takes away from my finger pointing at you, Shawn.
Yeah, you know what
Yeah.
I'm saying? Well, what it is like we will find every excuse to fall back into that way of life, right? We will find I used to find ways to justify not changing, and then maybe I'd have this great idea, right? But as soon as something went left, I'm jumping ship. I just abandoned all hope. You know what I'm saying? I done left the country. You know what I mean? Then you no longer start seeking better things, right? So it's about sitting down and listening and taking the suggestions that people give you, right? And quit trying to combat every damn thing, right? Quit trying to hold on to your old ideals. Quit trying to hold on to that old way of life and literally sit down and say, bro, I got something seriously wrong with me. I need some help. But take the suggestion. Take, learn. You know what I'm saying? Like sit down and really pay attention. The people that I see make this, bro, are not people who simply try to fix their lives. It's people who rebuild their lives, right? So it takes a phase of deconstructing the old me, where I got to tear down my old thought processes and the way I think about things, the way I choose to live. You know what I'm saying? I have to quit fighting with those things.
Well,
And I have to adopt a whole new different set.
it's a new mindset,
It's a new mindset
self
completely.
discipline,
That's why I tell people,
patience.
man, you look at me 5, 10 years ago, I'm a completely different person from the ground up, right? Because I quit trying to fight it. Stop trying to fight it and just accept stepping into a new life, right? And you start adopting spiritual principles, start practicing those things. You're not going to read them. You're not going to, I kind of, this is how I feel about the Bible as well. You know what I'm saying? You can read the Bible all you want. You can be the Albert Einstein of your era. You have all the knowledge in the world. But if you never use it, it's a waste.
Oh yeah,
If you never use it, it's a
bro, and
waste.
that hits hard too when you self realize you're like, oh crap, I've had this answer for 5 years and didn't use it.
Well, it's
Yeah.
going from 25 years of addiction, stepping into recovery, and coming to the realization, you know what? I don't know shit. I don't know shit from Shinola. You know what I mean? Like I am blind, I am stupid, like I'm all the things and I need help, you know? So it's really where, it's that acceptance that I got to change. And you got to embrace that change. You got to get comfortable with change. You got to get comfortable with being uncomfortable. That's all there is to it, bro.
Well,
That's growth.
yeah, and that's called the Dunning Kruger effect, ladies and gentlemen, where you don't know what you don't know. And so, with that, Sean, I appreciate your time this episode. It's been great talking
Appreciate
with you.
y'all. If y'all ever want to reach out, maybe come on as a guest on the show, or want to find a way to help support the Better Days Rain mission, you can reach me at Sean hashtag at betterdaysrain.com, or you can visit our Printify store. We sell merchandise, t-shirts, coffee cups, hats, mugs, all the things. It's winter time, so I'm gonna get the hoodies put back up. So we will have hoodies going for the wintertime. I know everybody's kind of asked about the hoodies, but we took them down for the summer. But those are going to go back up. Best way you can support our mission, man, is simply go to our YouTube channel and just click the subscribe button. That is literally the best way. Costs nothing, 30 seconds of your time. And what that does, that helps us extend our reach to people who need recovery, people seeking recovery. Even if you don't need it, I'm sure there's people in your lives or people that you know, or simply people on your friends list that could benefit from this recovery program. And with that, we are out.